They said even God can't sink this ship. 2 nights later, the ocean proved them wrong. Hi everyone, this is your host, and welcome to the channel. This is the story of Titanic, the unsinkable ship that sank. Back in 1912, Titanic was the biggest, grandest, most luxurious ship in the world. People who saw it for the first time couldn't believe their eyes. It was 883 feet long, 92 feet wide, weighed 46,000 tons, and cost $7 million. To give you an idea of how expensive that was, $7 million in 1911 was the equivalent of $223 million in 2020. The ship had everything from a swimming pool to a gym, a library to a beauty salon, restaurants to a dance floor. There were 3 classes of travel. But on the top 2 decks, there were no walls or railings, so that people could easily move around the entire ship. For the first time ever, there was a movie theater, with screenings throughout the voyage. The food was incredible. There were 400 dishes to choose from every night, including turtle soup, venison with cranberry sauce, and peach melba. The captain's dinner cost $1,000 per person. It's $30,000 in today's money. The food alone made the journey on Titanic 3 times as expensive as any other cruise. In fact, they even had menus embossed with gold leaf. Some of the ingredients, like the Canadian Rockies, had to be shipped halfway across the world to get to Europe. On April 10, 1912, Titanic was launched and set sail from Southampton, England. There were 2,224 passengers and crew on board. They were all excited to explore the ship and enjoy the journey. But sadly, none of them knew that it was going to be the last thing they ever did. You see, the ship was deemed unsinkable because it had a double bottom and 16 watertight compartments. Even if it did sink, the ship would float for a few days and then be fished out. Plus, there was no radar back then, and the crew just assumed that the lights they saw in the distance were other ships. So they continued on without realizing that they were heading straight into an iceberg field. Also, there weren't enough lifeboats for everyone on board. The captain was way too confident about the safety of his ship. He often boasted, "I could steer this ship safely with my eyes closed." Well, he might have been able to do that under normal circumstances, but this was far from normal. At 11:40 p.m., on April 14th, while most people were asleep, Titanic hit an iceberg on the starboard side, right above the waterline. But because the ship was so big, the iceberg didn't even slow it down. The crew didn't realize that they'd hit anything until 5 minutes later when they saw a lifeboat approaching. They started sounding the alarm, but it was too late. Within 2 hours, the ship had sprung a leak and was beginning to sink. Screams filled the air as people realized what was happening. Lifeboats were lowered into the water, but most of them were damaged and couldn't be used. By now, the captain was frantically calling for help, but no one was close enough to hear him. All around him, people were losing their minds. Some were praying, others were singing, and many were hugging their loved ones goodbye. People started to run for the lifeboats, but there weren't enough for everyone. So some people ended up jumping into the icy cold water. By this point, the water was freezing. If you stayed in it for more than 15 minutes, you were likely to die. Most people didn't make it that long. They either froze to death or were pulled under by giant waves. People who had lifeboats were safe, but where were the crew members? They had been instructed to lower the lifeboats into the water first, so they were nowhere to be found. Within 3 hours, Titanic had sunk 4,000 feet into the icy cold ocean. More than 1,500 people had died, mostly because the lifeboats were in terrible condition and the captain was way too late calling for help. But here's the thing. The lifeboats that were meant to save people were only available to the rich passengers. The poor passengers were locked below deck by the crew so that they wouldn't cause trouble. And when the ship started sinking, they were trapped below deck and couldn't get out. In fact, the captain's lifeboat was scheduled for the same day that the ship sank, but he canceled it for unknown reasons, so he never got the memo. This is the host. And if you want to hear more crazy stories, stay tuned.